Hi everyone, my name is Jane. I'm one of the workers from Wild Sexual Violence Prevention Association, and today we're here to talk to you about some of the psychoeducational activities we used in the Listen Up project.
Hello, my name is Alison and I'm a peer worker at the Listen Up, while on the Listen Up project.
I'm Katie and I'm a worker on Listen Up as well.
Acknowledgement of country. We want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people of Meanjin. They are the traditional owners of the land we are on today. We would like to pay our respects to the elders past and present. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
So during our presentation today, we will be talking about sexual, domestic and family violence. So this can be upsetting for a lot of people. If you feel upset or scared today, please feel free to take a break and look after yourself. You can also call 1-800-RESPECT. The number is 1-800-737-732. So what did we do? Alison, what did we do?
We did psychoeducational workshops around Queensland, including all the way up to Central Queensland, Rockhampton.
We went to Rocky, yeah.
Gold Coast,
yeah.
Brisbane,
yeah, and Logan.
And
Yeah.
Caboolture.
And Caboolture as well. So in these workshops, we had a range of things that we wanted to talk about and share information about. One of those was domestic, family and sexual violence. So how people can identify violence in their relationships. What else did we want to do, Alison?
Their rights in relationships, and it's like how and what they knew about what to be was safe in a relationship.
Yep. And also what's safe at services.
That's correct, Jane.
Yep. And we also wanted to talk about how and where people can get help if ever they're feeling unsafe. We do these kinds of workshops regularly at Wild, and the activities that we're using today could also be used in a number of different ways. They could be used in one-on-one settings or in other groups as well.
Activities.
So we're going to look at some of the main activities we used for these workshops. And again, these are things that we've also used in other groups at Wild as well. So the first one we're going to start with is called Good and Bad Relationships Activities. So what we wanted to do was to help participants understand more about violence in relationships, such as domestic, family and sexual violence. And why did we want to do this?
People with ID experience violence more. People with ID often don't get information about good and bad relationships. Katie?
Yeah, so you'll see we use ID a lot in this. So that's just the slang for intellectual disability, the acronym. But we know that people with intellectual disability experience violence at really, really high rates. And that we know that they're often excluded from relationship education, sex education, which means they're less likely to be aware of the rights they have in those relationships. So how did we do this? We spoke as a group about what a relationship is. So we had categories like family relationship, romantic or sexual relationship, friendship, stranger. So we kind of went through all the different ways you could have a relationship or lack of a relationship with someone. And we spoke about the different types using pictures.
How? We talked about how relationships could be bad, good or bad. We had 3 columns on a whiteboard that said good, bad, and unsure. We gave participants laminated cards with suggestions of good relationships actions and bad relationships actions.
Yeah.
How? We asked participants to place a card on the whiteboard in one of the columns. We told participants it was okay to use the unsure category if they didn't know or didn't understand. And finally, we let them know we will talk about it as a group and there is no wrong answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked as a group about each card and where it was placed, and we named what actions were classified as domestic, family violence, and sexual violence. So here is a bit of example of how we usually do that.
Yeah.
So we actually found on the day we had a lot of them in the unsure category,
Yeah.
as a lot of people were not quite sure where things went.
Yeah.
We also had a lot that we would classify as bad relationship actions placed in good, and good relationship actions placed in bad.
Yeah.
So which really lent itself to more discussion.
Yeah, I think during this activity, we noticed that people might need help reading and understanding the different actions. And people, I think, were looking for us to help them decide where the I guess the card should go. So I guess in this activity, it was really important to try and support the person to have a think about that themselves. And even if there was an action that is bad, that was put perhaps in the good category, that this is okay, because this was a really good opportunity to come back as a group and talk about this as a group and talk about what we thought. As if there's one person who's seeing this as good, there might be others. Also important not to, I guess, call people out and suggest that they're the ones who thought this was good when it was bad, as it was more supportive for the group to sort of come up with this, with the answer themselves.
So you see there, we've placed some of them in categories where they were commonly placed. So a lot of people were not sure if it was okay to spend time with friends or spend time alone.
Yeah.
And having different friends. A lot of people thought that was, bad, that you had different friends.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people actually put they never want to spend time without you in unsure or good.
Yeah.
Seeing it as a sign of affection or romantic gesture.
Yeah.
Similar with they tell you they can't live without you.
Yeah. I think we intentionally, when we were doing this, we created actions that might need a bit more discussion. So it wasn't so black and white, as some of these, for many people who have an intellectual disability, or anyone who experiences a lot of social isolation or loneliness, having someone around all the time and someone who's ringing all the time can be seen as a really good thing. So important to unpack this sort of stuff.
And we also, you feel safe with them in the good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had trouble with that word safe. That's like we unpacked a lot, or what does safe mean? How does it feel?
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, that was quite a tricky one to place.
Yeah.
And what we did afterwards is talk as a group, what could that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And sharing some information about, actually calling all the time could be seen as a sign of domestic violence. Having time alone can be seen as really healthy. But then as a group, we decided whether they should move or whether they should stay there.
Yeah. Okay, so how did it go? So again, as I spoke a little bit about this before, but participants did need some support to choose categories. So it was helpful. We have 3 workers supporting this activity, Katie and I and Alison. So going around helping people who might have difficulty with reading, and just supporting them to have a think through the options without swaying them to a certain category. As we've said, there was many in the unsure category. However, this was okay. In the end, at the end of the activity, we still had some in the unsure because people were still unsure about some. And this was okay. As a group, we decided that this was okay, where we could see that perhaps there could be arguments either side, and it wasn't a clear sort of case of domestic and family violence. Some people found this quite a triggering activity. There were people throughout this activity who needed some time out, who actually asked to step outside, or during the feedback at the end of the activity shared that this was a difficult activity to do. So again, having a number of workers there was really helpful. And I think before doing the activity, introducing that this can be difficult for people, this might bring up things that you weren't expecting, and sort of giving people I guess, permission to look after themselves, step outside if they needed to, and a worker needs to be able to go and support that person. But overall, it was a great success, even though I think it was challenging for a lot of different reasons. People were able to share in the feedback that they found this quite a good learning experience, and perhaps were able to identify things in a relationships that were unsafe that perhaps they hadn't thought of before.
That's correct, Jane. Good and bad relationship activities. Things to think about.
So make sure language is easy. It took us some time to get this right. We had to go back a number of times and change wording. Of course, we were very lucky to have Alison on the team, who was able to help us have a look at the words we were choosing and make sure that these were easy and concrete.
That's correct.
What else did we do, Alison?
Tell participants before you start that they might get upset on what support they can get. Make sure they're enough workers to give support. And finally, let participants make their own decisions. Talking through incorrect answers was the best part.
Yes.
A quote from the experts in the project. I got lots of rights. Right to be safe. To choose to feel safe. This was new information. I didn't know I had rights. I knew I shouldn't be hit, and I have the right to use my own money, but I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, I think this was a really powerful quote from one of the experts who was new to Wild and new to the group and hadn't had a lot of information about domestic and family violence and rights. So she really walked away from this activity with a lot of information that she didn't have, which was really fantastic to see. So I guess this was one of those experiences where, even though it may have been hard, there was some learning to be had from doing this activity.
Really good. Learning different things that I haven't learned before was good. I liked learning about all the different things. I made different rights.
Okay, so the next activity we did in the group was the gingerbread person activity. Now, I know that this one's quite commonly used, but we'll share how it went for the particular group we had. So we wanted to help participants learn what feeling unsafe feels like in their body. And why? Because making feelings concrete and easier to understand is quite difficult. So this is one way of doing that, is having physical sensations that can be actually felt and understood, which makes feelings a more concrete idea. And it helps participants understand that when they're feeling unsafe, they might need to get some help. So making that connection between, if your body's saying this, it might mean that you need to get some support. So how did we do this? We talked to participants about how we would know in our bodies that a relationship is bad. And we talked about our body having an alarm, which tells us that something is not okay.
How? We gave everyone a sheet with a body outline and colourful pens and stickers to use. Everyone was told to draw around their body. They would feel the alarm and get crafty with it. We helped as needed.
So this is a bit of an example, isn't it, Alison?
Are you being Jane there?
Oh, no, sorry, Jane's up. My apologies.
Yeah, so this is an example of one of the gingerbread people activity sheet that the participants used. So Alison, what can we see on the gingerbread person?
Cloudy thoughts.
Yep.
An upset face.
Yep.
Sweaty palms.
Yep.
Very fast heartbeat, like feels like your heart's racing out of your body.
Yeah, yeah.
And butterfly, nervous system in your stomach.
Yeah. So this person was able to identify a number of different ways that their body might let them know, or these are their alarms that let them know that they're not feeling safe and that they might need to seek support.
How? We came back together as a group and drew a large body outline on the board.
Yeah, so we decided to come back after everyone had a go at doing it individually and come up with a bit of a group gingerbread activity person. And so we asked each one to come up and add one thing from their own gingerbread person that they were that they had used in their activity. And of course, we offered support and were able to draw that on the board if people didn't want to. Of course, this was all optional. Nobody was, people have, of course, always have a right to choose whether they want to participate or not. But we felt that this could be a really useful way of showing all the number of different feelings or body reactions that different people might have when feeling unsafe.
And finally, we talked about flight, fight, and freeze responses.
Yeah. So once we had sort of everything up there, it was really important to talk through these different responses. Some people had some knowledge about this, some people didn't. So important to really concretize, so make it really easy to understand each of these different actions and really normalize that sometimes when we experience trauma, our body can take over and we can respond in different ways to keep ourselves safe. And that's quite a normal body response, even if we're doing something that perhaps we wouldn't have thought that we would have done. Okay, so how did it go? So again, a bit of mixed feedback for this one. So some people named it as their least favorite activity, while others really loved it. I remember reading someone from the feedback form who said that really being asked to think about how she feels when she feels unsafe was particularly triggering, and then naming those experiences was tricky. So again, we needed to really do a bit of I guess a trigger warning and explaining to people that, again, this might be an activity that causes distress. Please look after yourself. And I think throughout this, we used a lot of humor where appropriate, letting participants know that embarrassing body reactions were normal and could be helpful. I think I remember in one of the activities we had some diarrhea as a reaction, and talking about how that can be what happens sometimes. Upset tummy, that is what happens when you have an upset tummy. So really normalizing those sort of more embarrassing reactions was, I think, really helpful. So things to think about. There was a lot in this activity that we needed to spend some time making concrete. So feelings and alarm are really abstract concepts, so needed to spend a lot of time here explaining what we meant. In fact, we did a whole sort of brainstorm around alarms and naming different types of alarms. So, an ambulance or a clock, and naming all the alarms, and then really focusing in on, okay, so what is the main thing that these alarms are doing? And it's trying to alert us to something. So making it really clear what we're talking about when we're talking about an alarm. Important to tell participants that their experiences are normal in reducing feelings of shame, and getting really crafty with it. So as you can see from the example we used earlier, we had texters, we had stickers, I think there was even glitter. There was lots of opportunity for people to get crafty and try and have a bit of fun perhaps with the topic that's difficult. Made it easier, I think, for people to participate.
Another quote: "It was good to get ideas from the group. It was good to know who can help when you get a bad feeling. I liked the gingerbread woman the best."
So the worker role play activity, this was probably one of the favorites of the whole group. Probably got the best response. So what we wanted to do with it is to help participants know more about their rights when going to services. So moving away from that relationships and focusing more on services. Why? Because people with intellectual disability are often left out of conversations about their rights. So we found in the group, when we were getting to know people before they came to the group, a lot of people didn't know what a right was, didn't know what their rights were, or were misinformed about their rights. Mm-hmm. Many people have experience of their rights being ignored, especially when they're in institutionalized settings. And because of this, they don't have good experiences with services. So a lot of people said they wouldn't feel comfortable saying if they didn't want something, didn't like something, had a bad experiences, and were less likely to complain if they did.
How? We talked about rights and explained it as what is fair. We named as a group what our rights are in relationships and its services.
So we had like that big board up, didn't we, Alison?
We
We read every right that anyone could think of. And a lot of people were surprised about what was up there. So then we played the freeze activity. So in this activity, we had two workers doing a role play together. So one acting as a worker and one as a client. So often, Alison, you played the client and one of us played the worker. And we wore hats or headbands that were kind of a bit silly to show that we were in character. And we'd also shake in another role. So shake in, I'm the worker now. Yeah, you had a good shake. And then shake out, take your hat off, and you're out. You're back to being who you are. So participants watched the role play first, and they were told to look out for moments when the client in the role play does not have her rights respected.
How? We encourage participants to say freeze or raise their hands during the second watching of a role play. When they did this, the workers who were acting froze. We then talked as a group what rights were not being respected. We circled or added them to the whiteboard. After role play, we talked about what should have happened if clients' rights were being respected by the worker.
This was quite tricky, actually, to freeze for like long periods of time sometimes.
Yeah, at different points.
Yeah.
How did it go?
So participants really enjoyed this activity, didn't they, Alison?
They loved the activity.
They particularly liked the funny parts of shaking in and out of character and dressing up. And it just made it a bit sillier, which was easier to get the ideas across. And generally, participants were able to name points where the client wasn't being respected.
Which was a good thing.
Yeah.
So we're talking about these as rights was a bit tricky. So again, rights is a really abstract word that needed a lot of concrete. We needed to make sure it was concrete. And this was often the first time participants had talked about rights. As Katie explained earlier, we ended up changing rights to getting what is fair, because that is something that everyone in the group could connect to a little easier. And at times we had to draw attention to some of perhaps the missed moments where perhaps the rights wasn't being respected in the case study, but nobody had froze or raised their hand to tell us to freeze. So at this moment, another worker, so again, helpful to have a few workers on this one, was able to say, oh, hey, I'm actually thinking, what about this one? And again, asking the group to have a discussion about whether that was something that a right that wasn't being respected, without naming it as such, but just bringing it to people's attention to talk it through a little bit more. So when you're doing this one, there's a few things to consider. So again, take the time to really make sure everybody is understanding what a right is and not assuming that people might already have this knowledge. You're going to need at least 3 workers. So again, we had a peer worker and another worker who was running the role play. And then we had somebody else who was supporting the discussion and, perhaps picking up when people wanted to say something but didn't, or those missed moments that I just talked about. So the breaking in and out of character, I think was a bit confusing for some. So that's why having that third worker who was just always the worker, who was never in character, was really helpful. And being really clear when you're not in character is important. So using hats and things to say, yes, in this, I'm the worker. When I take this off, I'm Jane again. So I'm back, to let people know that had ended, and we were now doing a different activity.
Here's another quote. I liked the activity with client and worker. I got to see what Veronfin's cares can do. The peer worker was in this role play. It was very helpful. I really liked the role play. That was fantastic. The way it was spoken about. It really got you thinking.
So the themes of the activities. So what was some of the themes, Alison?
Having different ways of learning across workshops, written, visual, drawing / craft, role plays, and stories.
Yeah, so these psychoeducational workshops went for 2 days. So we tried to draw on a number of different ways to have these discussions. And we did this for a number of different reasons. I think to ensure, one of the reasons was to ensure that everyone could participate, but to also change it up and make it fun. I think someone talking at you for 2 days isn't very interactive, and we know that people learn using different methods. So we tried to make sure that that was something we catered to.
Consider accessibility and always name what supports is available at the beginning.
Yep. So before we did the workshops, we did a bit of a sort of a pre-workshop interview with people to learn a little bit more about them, their accessibility needs, and try to tailor the activities as best we could to meet those needs. But then again, always doing those discussions at the start to let people know that they can reach out for support or take a break if they need to.
Finally, while one worker is leading the activity, the other is looking at the group and checking for understanding.
Yep. So as I've said, in nearly all the activities, it required at least 3 workers to run the activity, but also be supporting participants to participate.
Thank you very much for taking part of this presentation. Look forward to watching you and letting you hear about the other ones.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.